there's winners, there has to be losers, and the reason that there are losers is because there's winners. And that's complete bloody nonsense, because as far as I'm concerned, and I really believe this, is that every single person who sets out to put themselves together ethically is a net positive to everyone around them. There's no downside to that. And my book has been criticized by people who've read it very poorly, especially chapter 1, when I talk about hierarchies, that I'm somehow supporting the idea that power in a hierarchy is the right way to be. And there's absolutely nothing in what I've written that suggests that at all. Like, I'm suggesting that human hierarchies are very complex, and that the way that you win in a human hierarchy is by being competent and reciprocal. And so, I mean, for example, even if you're selfish, let's say, you got to think very carefully about what that would mean if you were selfish and awake, because you have to work to take care of yourself and what you want, say, in this moment. But then there's you tomorrow, and there's you next week, and there's you next month, and next year, and 10 years from now, and when you're old. So because you're self-conscious and because you're aware of the future, you're actually a community unto yourself. And if you're selfish and impulsive, all that means is that you're serving the person you are right now, in that impulsive way, but not the person you're going to be. And so that's not a good grounds for any sort of ethical behavior. And I see that if you serve yourself properly, there's no difference between that and serving your family properly and serving your community properly, that those things all mesh in a kind of a harmonious manner. And one of the things that's really been effective in the lecture tour is a discussion about that idea and its relationship between that and meaning and responsibility, because one of the things that strikes the audience as silent constantly, because I'm always listening to them to see, when the attention is maximally focused, is whenever I point out to people that the antidote to the meaninglessness of their life and the suffering and the malevolence that they might be displaying because they're resentful and bitter about how things have turned out, the antidote to that is to take on more responsibility for themselves and for other people, and that's aspirational, which is kind of cool. The conservative types, the duty types, and I'm not complaining about them, they're always basically saying, well, this is how you should act, because in some sense that's your duty, right? That's how a good citizen would act. And that's a reasonable argument. But the case that I've been making is more that, well, there is value distinctions between things. Some things are worth doing and some things aren't, and you can kind of discover what that is for yourself, and then you should aim at the things that are most worth doing. And what you'll find, if you watch carefully, is that the things that you find worth doing are almost always associated with an increase in responsibility. Because if you think about the people you admire, for example, you spontaneously admire people, and that's a manifestation of the instinct to imitate. Again, people are very imitative. You don't admire people who don't take care of themselves. Like, unless there's something wrong with you, you at least want an admirable person to be accountable for themselves. And then if they've got something left over so they can be accountable for their family, well, then that's a net plus, obviously. That's someone you think is solid. And then maybe they take care of some more people. They have a business, or they're involved in the community in some positive way. You see, well, that's a person whose pattern of being is worth imitating. And that's all associated with responsibility. And it's so interesting, because it's as if everybody kind of knows this, but that it hasn't crystallized. It's like, well, you should be responsible because that's what a good citizen is. It's not, no, you should be responsible because you need to have a deep meaning in your life to offset the suffering so you don't get bitter. And the way you do that is to bear a heavy load, to get yourself in check for you now and for you in the future, and then to do the same for your family and your community, and that there's real nobility in that, and there's real meaning. And more, the other thing that I've been suggesting to people, and I also believe this, is that, and I think that the guys that have come to talk to me, especially the ones that have had real rough lives, they really understand this. If you don't get your act together and you let yourself slide, then what kind of moves in to take the place of what you could have been is something that's really not good at all. So it's not only that if you're living like a dissolute life, that you're not aiming at anything positive, and so you don't have any real meaning, and you're subsumed by anxiety and all of that, and hopelessness, but something kind of hellish moves in there too to occupy that place, and so then you end up making things worse. When people are very down and out and they decide to make a move forward, in some ways they're facing the whole panoply of problems that confront them in the guise of that single problem. Right? It's all lurking behind it, right? It's like, they see the tip of a reptile's tail outside a gigantic closet, let's say, and they look and they think, well, that's just the tip of a tail. What harm can it do me? But it's connected to the whole damn beast. And the advantage to that is that if you make that first step forward, you're actually advancing in the face of all that opposition. The disadvantage is that the first task seems so small that you literally have to be on your knees to be humble enough to lower yourself to take that first step. God, is that all I can do? I'm so useless. Now, the upside is that once you take that first step, you've looked the beast in the face, and you'll start progressing, not linearly, but exponentially in speed. So what's cool is that it doesn't really matter how small that first step is, because it'll start doubling, and anything that doubles grows unbelievably quickly. And so that's a very useful thing to know too. And that's true when you're learning anything new. It's like you'll feel like an imposter, you'll feel like a fool because you are, and you'll think, I'll never get there, and the destination might look very distant, but if you take a sufficiently small first step and get the ball rolling, you can be cruising along at a pretty good rate, generally faster than you'll think.
What's going on in one's psychology there? Is it building evidence of your own capabilities and capacity?
Definitely. What seems to happen when you expose people to small but challenging tasks, it does two things. It makes them more skilled because now they're actually dealing with the problem. And so they're acquiring the new perceptions and the new behaviors that are mastery. So they're actually expanding their domain of conceptual structures and actions. That's both conception and skill. But at the same time, they're seeing themselves as the actors that can change the direction of their life.